You think you can come into my town, drive a luxury car, and act like you matter?" The corrupt officer sneered from the witness stand, pointing a finger at the black man in shackles. "You're a nobody. Just another street thug pretending to be a king." The courtroom went silent. The judge looked down, the prosecutor smirked, and the jury shook their heads in disgust. It looked like the end. But they didn't know that the man in chains wasn't shaking with fear. He was checking his watch, because in exactly 10 seconds, that nobody was about to end the officer's entire career. Watch what happens when a dirty cop realizes too late that the man he framed is actually the FBI's top undercover agent. The air in the courtroom of the Fourth Circuit Court of Cook County was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the distinct, acrid scent of a life about to be ruined. Julian Bennett sat at the defense table, his wrists chafing against the cold steel of standard-issue handcuffs. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small, pulling tight across his broad shoulders. To the jury, he looked exactly like what District Attorney Thomas Reed said he was. A menace, a danger to society, a nobody from the South Side who had gotten his hands on a stolen Mercedes and a kilo of heroin. But Julian was none of those things. He kept his head down, eyes fixed on the grain of the wooden table. He wasn't praying. He was counting. "State your name and rank for the record," D.A. Reed boomed. Reed was a man who loved the sound of his own voice, a man who wore 3-piece suits to simple arrangements just to flex his budget. "Officer Riker Sterling, badge number 4092, Senior Patrol, 12th District." The voice from the witness stand was gravelly, confident, and dripping with arrogance. Julian looked up slowly. Riker Sterling was a massive man, built like a vending machine with a badge. His uniform was tight, his buzz cut severe. He sat in the witness box not like a servant of the public, but like a king on a throne. He chewed gum, a violation of courtroom etiquette that Judge Evelyn Hartwell seemed to be ignoring for the moment. "Officer Sterling," Reed continued, pacing in front of the jury box, making sure every juror saw his expensive Italian shoes. "Walk us through the events of November 14th. Sterling leaned into the microphone. "It was a standard patrol. I was stationed near the intersection of 5th and Grand, high crime area. We get a lot of transients moving through there." "Transients," Reed repeated, nodding as if this was a profound truth. "And what did you see?" "I saw a black Mercedes S-Class, late model. Tinted windows. It was swerving, crossing the double yellow line. Erratic driving, consistent with someone under the influence or fleeing a scene." Sterling's eyes flicked toward Julian. A smirk, barely perceptible, tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I initiated a traffic stop. Julian's public defender, a young, overworked woman named Sarah Jenkins, was scribbling furiously on her notepad. She looked terrified. She had told Julian earlier that Sterling was untouchable, a hero cop with the highest arrest record in the state. She had begged Julian to take a plea deal. 5 years, she had said. "If you fight this and lose, you'll get 20. Julian had refused. "And when the defendant pulled over, what happened?" Reed asked. "He was belligerent immediately," Sterling lied, smoothly. "Refused to lower the window. When he finally did, I smelled marijuana. Strong odor. I asked him to step out. He refused. I had to forcibly remove him for officer safety." Sarah Jenkins stood up, her voice shaking slightly. "Objection. The dashcam footage." "Sustained," Judge Hartwell said, though she sounded bored. "Stick to the facts, officer." "The facts are," Sterling said, his voice hardening, "that this man attacked me. He swung at me. I had to subdue him, and when I searched the vehicle, I found a duffel bag in the trunk, 1 kilo of pure heroin, and an unregistered Glock 19 with the serial number filed off. The jury gasped. A middle-aged woman in the front row clutched her pearls. Julian remained stone-faced. He remembered the arrest differently. There was no swerving. There was no marijuana. He had been pulled over because he was a black man in a $100,000 car in a neighborhood Sterling considered his personal kingdom. The attack had been Sterling dragging him out through the window and pistol-whipping him before he could say a word. The heroin? Planted. The gun? Sterling's drop piece. So, Reed said, stopping directly in front of Julian's table, leaning in so close Julian could smell his cologne. You found drugs, a weapon, and a violent suspect. Did the defendant say anything to you during the arrest? Sterling laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. Yeah. He kept shouting about how I didn't know who he was. Said he was important. Said he knew people. Sterling looked directly at Julian then. The silence in the room stretched thin. Let me tell you something, Sterling said, breaking protocol, speaking directly to Julian instead of the jury. I've been working these streets for 15 years. I know a player when I see one. You think you can come into my town, drive a luxury car, and act like you matter? You're a nobody. Just another street thug pretending to be a king. And now you're a caged animal. Exactly where you belong. Objection, Sarah shouted, standing up. Badgering the defendant. Withdrawn, Reed said quickly, smiling. He had gotten what he wanted. He had painted the picture. Judge Hartwell adjusted her glasses, peering down at Julian. Mr. Bennett, your attorney tells me you have refused to testify. You have refused to provide employment history. You have refused to provide character witnesses. You sit there in silence while these serious accusations are levied against you. Do you have anything to say? Julian's eyes locked onto Riker Sterling. The cop was smirking, already thinking about the celebration drinks he was going to have with D.A. Reed later. They thought this was a slam dunk. They thought Julian Bennett was just another statistic to pad their numbers. Julian slowly stood up. The chains rattled, echoing through the silent courtroom. Sarah tugged at his sleeve. Julian, sit down. Don't say anything. Julian ignored her. He looked at the judge. Your Honor. His voice was calm, deep, and surprisingly articulate. It wasn't the voice of a street thug. It was the voice of a man used to giving orders. I haven't refused to provide my employment history. I was legally restricted from doing so. Until now. Sterling rolled his eyes. Here we go. I work for the CIA defense. We hear it every week, Your Honor. Silence, officer, Judge Hartwell snapped. She looked at Julian with renewed interest. Restricted? By whom? Julian turned his body so he was facing the gallery, facing the camera that was recording for the court archives, and finally facing Sterling. By the United States Department of Justice, Julian said. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. D.A. Reed chuckled audibly. Your Honor, please, the defendant is clearly delusional. I ask that we move to closing arguments. I have one piece of evidence to introduce, Julian said, reaching into the pocket of his orange jumpsuit. Hold it. The bailiff's hand went to his gun. Hands where I can see them. It's just a piece of paper, Julian said calmly, pulling out a folded, slightly crumpled letter. And a request. A request? The judge asked. I request that Officer Sterling read this document aloud to the court. It's a transcript of a text message sent from his personal phone, number 55550192, at 10:42 p.m. on the night of my arrest. Sterling's face went pale. The smirk vanished instantly. He froze in the witness box. Objection! Reed shouted. This is ambush. We haven't seen this document. It's impeachment evidence, Julian said coolly. "Admissible if it proves the witness is lying. And, Your Honor, he's lying." Judge Hartwell extended her hand. "Bailiff, bring me that note." The bailiff took the paper from Julian and handed it to the judge. The room was deadly silent. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to grow louder. Judge Hartwell read the note. Her eyebrows shot up. Her face flushed red. She looked from the paper to Sterling, then back to the paper. "Officer Sterling," the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Is this your phone number?" Sterling swallowed hard. I don't recall, Your Honor." "Read it," the judge commanded, handing the paper back to the bailiff to give to Sterling. "Read it to the jury. Now." Sterling took the paper. His hands were shaking. He looked at the text. I can't read this." "Read it!" Judge Hartwell slammed her gavel down so hard the wood splintered. Sterling licked his lips. He looked at D.A. Reed for help, but Reed was busy flipping through his files, suddenly very interested in avoiding eye contact. "It says," Sterling's voice cracked. "Got another one. Black male, S-class. Nobody knows him. Gonna plant the stash and the toy. Easy overtime. Dinner's on me, boys." The gasp that went through the courtroom wasn't just shock, it was horror. "A nobody," Julian repeated from the defense table. "That's what you called me." Julian reached into his other pocket. This time he didn't move slowly. He moved with the precision of a viper. He slammed a leather wallet onto the defense table. It fell open. A gold shield gleamed under the courtroom lights. Below it, an ID card with the bold letters, "Federal Bureau of Investigation. My name is Special Agent Julian Bennett," he announced, his voice booming like thunder. "I am the lead investigator for the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force, and Officer Sterling, you didn't arrest me. I arrested you." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was as if the entire courtroom had been turned to stone. The gold badge on the table seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Then, chaos. Reporters in the back row jumped to their feet, rushing for the doors to call their editors. The jury members were whispering frantically to one another. D.A. Thomas Reed dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the floor, but he didn't bend to pick it up. He was staring at the badge, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. "Order! Order in this court!" Judge Hartwell shouted, banging her gavel repeatedly. Riker Sterling sat frozen in the witness box. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a curb and seen a semi-truck inches from his face. This is fake," he stammered, his voice rising in panic. "He's lying. It's a fake badge. He's a con artist." Julian Bennett didn't shout. He didn't scream. He simply reached down and unlocked his own handcuffs with a small key he had concealed in his palm. The click-click of the shackles falling onto the table was louder than the judge's gavel. "Bailiff," Judge Hartwell said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Verify that credential." The bailiff, a burly man named Miller who had worked with Sterling for years, walked over to the defense table. He picked up the leather wallet. He looked at the holographic seal. He looked at the ID card. He looked at Julian. Miller looked back at the judge. "It's real, Your Honor. It's federal. High clearance." Julian rubbed his wrists, looking at the red marks the cuffs had left. He walked out from behind the defense table. He wasn't the defendant anymore. He owned the room. "Officer Sterling," Julian said, pacing slowly toward the witness stand. "You called me a nobody. You said I was just another street thug. You didn't bother to run my plates properly, did you? If you had, you would have seen a level 5 security flag. But you were too busy calculating your overtime pay." I had probable cause," Sterling shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "You were swerving." "There was no swerving," Julian said calmly, "and there was no heroin in my trunk until you put it there. We have it all, Riker. We have the audio. We have the video. My car wasn't just a car. It was a mobile surveillance unit." Julian turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 6 months, the FBI has been investigating a ring of corrupt officers in the 12th District. Officers who target minority drivers, plant evidence, and extort money to make charges go away. We called it Operation Blue Shark." He pointed a finger at Sterling. "And you, Riker, were the shark we were hunting." "This is entrapment," D.A. Reed suddenly shouted, finding his voice. He stood up, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this is a farce. Even if he is an agent, he cannot entrap an officer into committing a crime. This case must be dismissed." "Dismissed?" Julian laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Mr. Reed, you might want to save your breath for your own attorney." Reed froze. "Excuse me?" "Did you think we didn't look at the prosecution records?" Julian asked, turning his gaze on the DA. 75% of Officer Sterling's arrests result in convictions, an impossibly high number. And who prosecutes every single one of them? You do. You rubber stamp his lies. You bury the complaints. You take the wins to boost your campaign for Attorney General. "That is a baseless accusation," Reed sputtered, but his hands were trembling. "Is it?" Julian reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small black flash drive. He held it up. "This drive contains 300 hours of wiretap recordings, including a phone call between you and Officer Sterling 2 days ago, where you discussed how to bury me because I looked like I might have money to fight back." The silence returned, heavier than before. Judge Hartwell looked at the prosecutor. Her expression was one of pure disgust. "Mr. Reed," she said icily, "is this true?" I reserve my right to remain silent," Reed whispered, invoking the Fifth Amendment in the very court where he had stripped so many others of their rights. "Smartest thing you've said all day," Julian remarked. Julian turned back to Sterling. The big cop was shrinking in his seat. The arrogance was gone. The bulldog was now a frightened puppy. "Riker Sterling," Julian said formally, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, possession of narcotics with intent to distribute, perjury, and civil rights violations under Title 18, Section 242. Sterling looked around the room, his eyes darting to the exits. "You can't do this here. I'm a cop. I have rights." "You had a badge," Julian corrected him. "You traded it for a few $1,000s and a power trip." Julian nodded to the back of the room. The heavy double doors of the courtroom swung open. 6 men in windbreakers with bold yellow letters, FBI, marched in. They were led by Assistant Director Harrison, a stern-faced man with grey hair. "Secure the room," Harrison ordered. 2 agents moved toward the prosecutor's table. 2 more moved toward the exits. Harrison walked straight to the witness stand. "Stand up, Sterling," Harrison barked. Sterling didn't move. He gripped the railing of the witness box. "No, no! This is my house! You can't touch me in here!" "It's not your house anymore," Julian said, stepping up to the stand. He leaned in close, his face inches from the corrupt officers. "Remember what you said to me in the holding cell? You said, 'Nobody is coming for you.'" Julian smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "You were wrong, Riker. Everybody is coming for you." Julian grabbed Sterling by the collar of his uniform and yanked him to his feet. Sterling tried to swing, a desperate, clumsy punch aimed at Julian's jaw. Julian blocked it effortlessly, swept Sterling's legs, and slammed him face first onto the floor of the witness box. The thud shook the room. "Stay down!" Julian commanded, twisting Sterling's arm behind his back. "Get off me! Get off me!" Sterling screamed, sounding like a child throwing a tantrum. Julian pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. His own FBI-issue steel cuffs. He slapped them onto Sterling's wrists, tightening them just enough to be uncomfortable. "Riker Sterling," Julian recited, his voice ringing out for the cameras. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Julian read the Miranda rights, the jury watched in awe. The nobody defendant was now the one holding the chains. But the story wasn't over. As the agents hauled a struggling Sterling out of the courtroom, Julian turned his attention to the gallery. He scanned the faces in the crowd until his eyes landed on a man in the back row. A man wearing a tailored grey suit, trying very hard to look invisible. It was Senator Corcoran, the man who had appointed the police chief, the man who had endorsed D.A. Reed. Julian tapped his earpiece. "Don't let the senator leave the building," he said softly. The senator's eyes went wide. He bolted for the door. "Part 2 is done," Julian whispered to himself. "Now the real war begins." The heavy oak doors of the courtroom burst open, slamming against the marble walls of the hallway. Senator Patrick Corcoran, a man usually seen moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator, was sprinting. His Italian loafers slipped on the polished floor as he scrambled toward the elevator bank. He punched the down button frantically, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Come on," he hissed, checking over his shoulder. Behind him, the courtroom was a chaotic scene of shouting reporters and flashing cameras, but Corcoran wasn't worried about the press yet. He was worried about the man who had just dismantled his entire enforcement arm in less than 10 minutes. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. Corcoran lunged forward and slammed chest first into a wall of muscle. 2 FBI agents stood in the elevator car, arms crossed. They didn't blink. "Going down, Senator?" one of them asked dryly. Corcoran stumbled back, straightening his tie with trembling hands. This is a misunderstanding. I have a flight to catch. Washington is waiting." "Washington can wait," a voice came from behind him. Corcoran spun around. Julian Bennett was walking down the hallway. He had shed the ill-fitting orange jumpsuit jacket, revealing a black tactical t-shirt underneath that hugged his frame. His badge hung on a chain around his neck, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He looked nothing like the nobody defendant from 10 minutes ago. He looked like Judgment Day. "Agent Bennett," Corcoran said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Impressive show in there, truly. But let's be reasonable. I'm a United States Senator. You can't just detain me in a hallway like a common criminal." "You're right," Julian said, closing the distance. "I can't detain you like a common criminal." Julian stopped 2 feet from the senator. The height difference was intimidating. Julian towered over the politician. "I have to detain you like a high-value criminal, which means I don't read you your rights. I let the indictment do it for me." "Indictment?" Corcoran laughed nervously. "You have nothing on me. I don't patrol the streets. I don't plant drugs. I'm a public servant." "We know you don't plant the drugs, Patrick," Julian said, using the senator's first name with deliberate disrespect. "You just buy the land." Corcoran's face went slack. I don't know what you're talking about." "Operation Blue Shark wasn't just about dirty cops," Julian explained, his voice loud enough for the gathering crowd of reporters to hear. "It was about why the cops were dirty. We tracked the arrest records of Officer Sterling. 90% of his arrests happened in 3 specific blocks in the South Side. Blocks that were designated blighted because of high crime rates." Julian pulled a folded map from his back pocket and snapped it open. "And who owns the shell corporation that just bought those 3 blocks for pennies on the dollar? Corcoran Development Group. You were using Sterling to terrorize the neighborhood, drive down property values, and arrest the young men who lived there so you could bulldoze their homes and build luxury condos. The reporters gasped. Camera shutters clicked like machine gun fire. "That is a lie!" Corcoran screamed, his composure shattering. "That is libel." "It's a RICO case," Julian countered calmly. "Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. We traced the wire transfers, Patrick. Sterling's overtime came directly from your offshore account in the Caymans. We have the bank records. We have the emails. We even have the text message you sent to D.A. Reed this morning. Make sure the Bennett kid goes away for 20 years. I need that block cleared by Christmas." Corcoran looked around for an escape route, but he was surrounded. To his left, the FBI agents. To his right, the voracious press. In front of him, the man he had tried to bury. "You can't do this," Corcoran whispered, tears of rage forming in his eyes. "I know the governor. I know the president." "Good," Julian said, pulling out his handcuffs. "You can tell them all about it on visiting day." Julian spun the senator around. Corcoran resisted, thrashing his arms. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," Julian said, clicking the cuffs onto the senator's wrists, tight enough to pinch. "You're prisoner number 4592. As the agents led the weeping senator away, a young reporter with a microphone shoved her way to the front. "Agent Bennett! Agent Bennett! How long have you been undercover?" Julian stopped. He looked directly into the camera lens. "Long enough to know that justice is blind," Julian said, his voice hard. "But I'm not. If you abuse your power in this city, if you prey on the people you swore to protect, look over your shoulder, because I'm already there." He turned and walked away, not toward the exit, but back toward the holding cells. He wasn't done. He had the money man, and he had the muscle. But there was still a rat to catch. The interrogation room at the FBI field office was soundproof, cold, and smelled of antiseptic. It was designed to make people feel small. Riker Sterling sat at the metal table, his hands cuffed to the steel ring bolted to the floor. He had been stripped of his uniform. He was wearing grey federal sweats now. Without the badge, without the gun, and without the uniform, the bulldog looked deflated. He looked like what he was, a middle-aged bully who had finally met someone he couldn't hit. The door buzzed and opened. Julian walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on the table, just out of Sterling's reach, and took a sip from the other. He didn't sit down. He just leaned against the wall, watching Sterling. "I want a lawyer," Sterling grunted. "You have a lawyer," Julian said. "He's in the lobby, public defender. Ironically, it's the same guy you used to make fun of in court last year. He doesn't seem very eager to cut you a deal." Sterling sneered. "I'm not talking. D.A. Reed will fix this. The senator will fix this. You think you won because you have a badge? This is Chicago. Politics runs everything. By tomorrow morning, I'll be out on bail and you'll be transferred to Alaska." Julian chuckled softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a remote control. He pointed it at the small TV mounted in the corner of the room. "You've been in processing for 3 hours, Riker. You missed the news." The screen flickered to life. It was a live, breaking news feed. The headline in bold red letters read, "Senator Corcoran arrested in housing scandal." The footage showed Corcoran being shoved into the back of an FBI van, weeping openly. Sterling's eyes went wide. "No. It gets better," Julian said, changing the channel. The next screen showed District Attorney Thomas Reed standing at a podium, surrounded by microphones. He looked pale, sweaty, and terrified. "I was unaware of Officer Sterling's illegal activities," Reed was saying on the screen, his voice shaking. "I am fully cooperating with the FBI investigation. I have agreed to provide full testimony regarding the criminal conduct of Riker Sterling in exchange for immunity regarding my administrative oversights." Julian turned the TV off. The room went silent again. "Did you hear that, Riker?" Julian asked softly. "Your best friend, Tom Reed. The guy you bought dinner for every Friday. He just rolled on you. He's giving us everything. The planted evidence, the false reports, the skimmed drug money. He's painting you as the mastermind to save his own skin." Sterling was trembling now. The reality was crashing down on him. The blue wall of silence had crumbled. He was alone. They can't do that," Sterling whispered. "I did what they told me. Corcoran told me which neighborhoods to hit. Reed told me which cases to fudge." "I know," Julian said, finally sitting down in the chair opposite Sterling. "But they're suits, Riker. Politicians. When the ship sinks, they throw the cargo overboard to stay afloat. You're the cargo." Julian leaned forward. "You're looking at 30 years, Riker. Federal time. And let me tell you, federal prison isn't like the county jail you run. The guys in there, they don't care about your badge. In fact, a lot of them are there because of guys like you. You won't last a week in general population." Sterling started to cry. Ugly, heaving sobs. "I have a family. I have 2 daughters." "Did you think about my family when you planted that heroin?" Julian asked, his voice suddenly dropping to a growl. "Did you think about the family of Marcus Cole, the kid you framed last year who hung himself in his cell?" Sterling flinched, as if he'd been slapped. "I can't save you from prison, Riker," Julian said, leaning back. "You earned that. But I can control where you go. I can put you in a protective custody wing. Low security. You might actually survive to see your daughters graduate. What do you want?" Sterling wiped his nose on his sleeve. "I want the stash houses," Julian said. "Corcoran was the money, Reed was the cover. But you ran the streets. We know you didn't turn in all the drugs you seized. We know you're sitting on a stockpile." Sterling hesitated. "If you don't tell me," Julian said, standing up and grabbing the door handle, "I walk out of here. And I tell the press that you're the one who snitched on the senator. Imagine what Corcoran's mob connections will do to you inside when they think you were the rat." "Wait!" Sterling screamed, straining against his cuffs. "Wait! Don't leave!" Julian stopped, his hand on the knob. He didn't turn around. 14th and Pine," Sterling blurted out. "The old auto body shop. It's in the basement under the lift. Guns, cash, and about 10 kilos of product. And the ledger." Julian turned around slowly. "The ledger?" "The payroll," Sterling gasped. "The list of every cop on the senator's payroll. There's more than just me. There's captains. There's judges." Julian smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just found the entire pack. "Good boy, Riker," Julian said. He opened the door. 2 agents were waiting outside. "Get a warrant for 14th and Pine," Julian ordered, "and bring in the tactical team. We're going to need a bigger van." As Julian walked down the corridor, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. He opened it. "You think you won. But you just cut off the head of a hydra. Watch your back, Agent. The 12th District doesn't forgive." Julian stopped walking. He stared at the screen. He had taken down the senator, the DA, and the star cop. But Sterling was right about one thing. Corruption didn't die easily. He typed a reply. "Come and get me." He hit send and shoved the phone into his pocket. The battle was over, but the war was just getting hot. And Julian Bennett was just getting started. The raid on the auto body shop at 14th and Pine happened at 2:00 a.m. It was executed with the kind of surgical precision that Riker Sterling and his goons could only dream of. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the Chicago streets into slick, black rivers of oil and grime. Julian sat in the command van, watching the thermal feeds from the drone hovering silently above the rusted corrugated roof of the shop. "Alpha team in position," a voice crackled over the radio. "Breaching in 3, 2, 1. On the screen, white-hot silhouettes swarmed the building. Flashbangs detonated, bright flares of light that washed out the thermal camera for a split second. Then, the muffled thump, thump, thump of suppressed carbine fire. Julian didn't flinch. He just watched. "Clear left, clear right, 1 suspect down, 2 secured." "Jackpot," the team leader's voice came back, breathless. "We found the lift. It's hollow underneath. We're looking at enough heroin to sedate an elephant. And guns, crates of them, military grade." "The ledger?" Julian asked, pressing the talk button. "Do you have the book?" There was a pause. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, feeling like 10 hours. "Yeah, boss. We got it. It was in a fireproof safe, welded to the floor. We had to blow the hinges. It's thick, Bennett, real thick." Julian let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Bag it. Tag it. Bring it to me personally. Nobody else touches it. Not even the local PD support." "Copy that." Julian stepped out of the van into the pouring rain. The flashing blue and red lights of the perimeter cars danced across the wet pavement. He felt a moment of satisfaction. They had the drugs, the guns, and the names. It was over. Or so he thought. As the tactical team began hauling out crates of evidence, Julian walked toward his personal vehicle, a nondescript black SUV parked just outside the caution tape. He was exhausted. The adrenaline from the courtroom showdown was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. He needed coffee, and he needed to start decoding that ledger. He unlocked his car and slid into the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine didn't start. Instead, the dashboard lights flickered and died. Julian frowned. Battery? No, this was a government-issue vehicle, maintained weekly. Then he heard it. A small, rhythmic beep, 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 coming from beneath the chassis. His blood ran cold. Instinct took over, the kind of instinct honed by years of undercover work, where a split second meant the difference between life and a closed casket. Julian threw the door open and dove out onto the wet asphalt, scrambling on his hands and knees away from the vehicle. Boom! The explosion lifted the SUV 5 feet into the air. A fireball erupted, turning the rainy night into a blinding orange inferno. The shockwave hit Julian like a physical hammer, slamming him face first into the pavement. Glass and twisted metal rained down around him like deadly confetti. His ears were ringing. A high-pitched whine drowned out the shouting of the agents behind him. He rolled onto his back, gasping for air, staring up at the burning skeleton of his car. If he had been inside for 2 more seconds. "Agent Bennett! Agent Bennett!" Hands grabbed his vest, dragging him further back. It was Agent Ross, a young field operative. "Sir, are you hit?" Julian shook his head, coughing as the acrid smoke filled his lungs. I'm good. Secure the scene. It's a hit." "A hit?" Ross yelled over the roar of the fire. "Who?" "The text message," Julian rasped, struggling to his feet, swaying slightly. "They said the 12th District doesn't forgive. They weren't kidding." He looked at the burning wreckage. This wasn't just a warning. This was an assassination attempt. Whoever was on that ledger wasn't just some corrupt cop skimming drug money. They were organized, they were militarized, and they were terrified of what Julian was about to read. "Ross!" Julian barked, his voice returning with a dangerous edge. "Where is the ledger?" "Team Leader Miller has it in the armored truck, sir." "Get in the truck," Julian ordered. "We're not going to the field office. They'll expect us there. We're going to the safe house in Cicero. Protocol Black. No radios, no cell phones. We go dark." "Sir, shouldn't we call the director?" "We don't know who the director talks to," Julian said grimly, wiping soot from his face. "Until I read that book, I trust no one." The ride to Cicero was tense. Julian sat in the back of the armored transport, the black leather notebook resting on his knees. It looked innocuous, just a simple accounting book you could buy at any office supply store. But inside, written in neat, precise handwriting, were the sins of an entire city. He opened the first page. It wasn't just names, it was dates, amounts, favors. Novi 12, Officer Sterling, $5,000, protection for shipment. Novi 14, D.A. Reed, $15,000, dismissal of case, Nagra 49 Nenahutu. Julian flipped forward. The amounts got larger. The names got more recognizable. Deck 01, Judge Holloway, $50,000. Search warrant denial. Julian froze. Judge Holloway, the Chief Justice of the Circuit Court, the man who signed off on the wiretaps for the very investigation Julian was running. He flipped further. Jan 10, Councilman Green, $100,000, rezoning approval. Green, the man of the people, the politician who ran on a platform of cleaning up the streets. Julian felt sick. The corruption didn't just climb the ladder, it was the ladder. But it was the last entry on the last page that made Julian's heart stop. It was dated 3 days ago. Payment pending. The cleaner. Target. Agent J. Bennett. Price. $250,000. "They put a $250,000 bounty on my head," Julian whispered. "Sir?" Miller asked from the driver's seat. "Drive faster," Julian said, closing the book. "We aren't safe anywhere." As they sped down the highway, Julian's mind raced. The cleaner. It was a myth in the underworld, a contract killer who never missed, who made deaths look like accidents or suicides. The car bomb was sloppy, which meant the cleaner hadn't arrived yet. The bomb was a local job, a panic move by the cops who knew the walls were closing in. But if the cleaner was coming... Suddenly, the armored truck swerved violently. "Contact!" Miller shouted. "Black SUVs! No plates! They're ramming us!" Julian grabbed the handle above the door. Through the bulletproof rear window, he saw 3 large SUVs flanking them. A man leaned out of the passenger window of the lead car, holding a submachine gun. Bullets sparked against the armored plating of the truck. Ping, ping, ping! "They're trying to run us off the road!" Miller yelled, wrestling with the steering wheel. "Don't let them box you in," Julian shouted. He grabbed his service rifle from the rack. "Ross, open the rear port." "Sir, are you crazy? Open it!" Ross unlatched the small firing port in the back doors. Julian shoved the barrel of his rifle through. He took a breath, timing the sway of the truck. He squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop, pop! The windshield of the pursuing SUV shattered. The driver swerved, overcorrecting. The SUV spun out of control, clipping the front bumper of the second attacker. The first SUV flipped, rolling violently into the ditch in a shower of sparks. "One down!" Ross cheered. But the remaining 2 were aggressive. One pulled alongside the armored truck, grinding against the side. The metal screeched, a horrible, ear-splitting sound. Julian saw the driver of the sidecar. He was wearing a tactical mask. He raised a shotgun, aiming not at the tires, but at the driver's window of the truck. "Miller, brake check!" Julian screamed. Miller didn't hesitate. He slammed on the brakes. The attacking SUV shot past them. As it did, Julian shifted his aim and fired into the rear tires of the passing vehicle. The tire blew. The SUV fishtailed, slamming into the concrete median barrier with a bone-crunching impact. The third SUV, seeing its comrades destroyed, peeled off, taking the nearest exit and disappearing into the night. Miller got the truck back under control, his hands shaking on the wheel. Jesus, and that was close. Julian didn't celebrate. He stared at the retreating taillights of the third car. They know we have the book, Julian said quietly. They aren't trying to kill me anymore, Miller. They're trying to destroy the evidence. He looked down at the ledger in his lap. We need to get this to the only person in the city who isn't on this list, Julian said. Who is that? Ross asked. The Attorney General, Julian replied. But she's in D.C. giving a speech. We have to survive until she lands tomorrow morning. And until then? Julian loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle. Until then, we hunt. The safe house was a converted warehouse in the industrial district of Cicero. It had reinforced steel doors, no windows on the ground floor, and its own encrypted server. It was supposed to be a fortress. Julian paced the concrete floor, the ledger open on a metal table under a single halogen lamp. It was 4:00 a.m. He hadn't slept in 20 hours. He had cross-referenced the names. He had built a conspiracy board on the wall, connecting threads of red yarn between photos of judges, cops, and politicians. The picture it painted was terrifying. The 12th District wasn't just a police precinct. It was a criminal enterprise masquerading as law enforcement. And the man at the center of the web? The man designated as Kingpin in Julian's notes? It wasn't Senator Corcoran. Corcoran was just a middleman. The money trail led to a shell company owned by Liam Thorne, the deputy mayor of Chicago. Wait, I cannot use the name Thorne. I must correct this. The money trail led to a shell company owned by Deputy Mayor Richard Graves. Graves was the golden boy of city politics, untouchable, loved by the media, and apparently the man who had ordered the hit on Julian. We have a problem, Agent Ross said, coming into the room holding a tablet. I've been monitoring the police bands. There's a code 1033 at County Jail. Julian looked up sharply. Code 1033? That's an officer in distress, or a riot. It's the protective custody wing, Ross said, his face pale. Where we put Riker Sterling. Julian cursed. They're cleaning up loose ends. Sterling knows where the rest of the bodies are buried. If he dies, half these names on the list walk free because we lose the corroborating witness. It gets worse, Ross continued. The responding unit isn't SWAT. It's the 12th District Tactical Team, the same guys who worked for Sterling. They aren't going in to save him, Julian realized, grabbing his vest. They're going in to finish the job. Julian grabbed the ledger and shoved it into his tactical bag. We're leaving. To the jail? Miller asked, standing up from his cot. Sir, that's suicide. If the 12th is there, it's going to be a war zone. Sterling is a scumbag, Julian said, checking his pistol. He framed me. He beat me. He called me a nobody. But right now, he's the most valuable asset the United States government has. And I'll be damned if I let a bunch of dirty cops kill my witness. Julian looked at his two men. You don't have to come. This isn't sanctioned. Miller racked the slide of his shotgun. You drove a Mercedes into a trap to catch a racist cop. I think we're way past sanctioned, boss. Let's go get the bastard. The scene at Cook County Jail was chaos. Smoke billowed from the east wing. Alarms blared into the night air. Police cruisers from the 12th District formed a perimeter, but they weren't securing the area. They were blocking anyone else from getting in. Julian pulled the armored truck up to the rear gate, the one used for kitchen deliveries. It was guarded by 2 officers in riot gear. Roll down the window, Julian told Miller. The guard stepped forward, raising his hand. Turn around. Facility is in lockdown. No access. Julian leaned across Miller. FBI, we have a prisoner transfer order for inmate Sterling. The guard hesitated. He tapped his earpiece. Command, I've got feds at the back gate, asking for Sterling. Julian didn't wait for the reply. He knew what the order would be. Miller, go. Miller stomped on the gas. The heavy armored truck surged forward. The guard dove out of the way as the truck smashed through the chain-link gate, the metal screaming as it tore apart. "We're in!" Julian shouted. "Get to the PC block!" They drove through the prison yard, dodging debris. Inmates were running loose in the lower yard, but the real action was in the tower. The truck screeched to a halt outside the entrance to Block C. Julian kicked the door open and sprinted inside, Miller and Ross flanking him. The corridors were filled with smoke. The sprinkler system was raining down water. Bodies of inmates and guards lay on the floor, the result of the staged riot. They reached the heavy steel door of the protective custody unit. It was being cut open with a torch from the inside. "They're already in!" Julian yelled. He raised his rifle. "Federal agents! Drop it!" 3 men in black tactical gear, no badges, no insignia, spun around from the door. They were wearing gas masks. They raised their weapons. Julian didn't hesitate. He fired. The hallway erupted in a deafening exchange of gunfire. Bullets sparked off the concrete walls. One of the hitmen went down. Miller took a hit to his vest and stumbled back, grunting in pain but keeping his shotgun up. "Flashbang!" Ross yelled, tossing a canister down the hall. Bang! The blinding light stunned the remaining 2 attackers. Julian surged forward through the smoke, moving like a ghost. He tackled the second gunman, slamming him against the wall and stripping his weapon. He delivered a swift strike to the man's throat, dropping him. The third gunman turned to run, but Ross dropped him with a precise shot to the leg. Julian reached the cell door. Through the small reinforced window, he saw Riker Sterling. The big ex-cop was huddled in the corner of his cell, clutching a shiv made from a toothbrush. He was weeping, his eyes wide with terror. He looked up and saw Julian's face in the window. For a moment, Sterling looked confused. Then he looked relieved. "Open it!" Julian shouted to Miller, who was rigging a small explosive charge to the lock. "Fire in the hole!" The lock blew. The door swung open. Julian stepped in. The water from the sprinklers dripped off his nose. He looked down at the man who had tried to ruin his life just 24 hours ago. "Get up, Riker," Julian said. Sterling scrambled to his feet. You came back. They sent a hit squad. My own guys." "I told you," Julian said, grabbing Sterling by the arm and hauling him toward the door. "Nobody touches my witness." "Bennett!" Ross shouted from the hallway. "We have movement. A lot of it. The 12th District SWAT team is coming up the stairs. They aren't going to let us walk out of here." Julian looked at the hallway. Then he looked at Sterling. Then he looked at the ledger in his bag. They were trapped. 3 agents and a snitch against an army of corrupt cops who had nothing left to lose. Julian tapped his earpiece. "This is Agent Bennett, transmitting on the emergency frequency. I am at Cook County Jail, Block C. I have a high-value witness. I am under fire from hostile forces. I repeat, police officers are firing on federal agents. Any available units, assist immediately." Static. Then a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't the state police. It wasn't the Attorney General. "Agent Bennett," a deep voice rumbled. "This is Captain Jackson, Illinois National Guard. We just got a call from D.C. Hold your position, son. The cavalry is coming." Julian smiled. A genuine smile this time. "Copy that, Captain," Julian said, raising his rifle toward the stairwell door as it began to bulge from a battering ram. "But you better hurry. We're about to have a party." The door to the stairwell burst open. Smoke grenades rolled in. "Let's dance," Julian whispered. The steel door to the cell block gave way with a deafening screech. Through the smoke, the tactical shields of the 12th District SWAT team advanced like a phalanx of Roman soldiers. They weren't shouting commands to surrender. They were moving in silence, intent on erasure. "Suppressing fire!" Julian roared. He and Ross unleashed a volley of rounds into the fatal funnel of the doorway, sparks flying as bullets deflected off the heavy ballistic shields. It slowed the advance, but only for a second. "We're out of ammo in 30 seconds, Ross yelled, swapping his last magazine. Miller was slumped against the wall, his face pale from blood loss, clutching his shotgun with one hand. Sterling was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing. This is it, Julian thought. He checked his sidearm. 7 rounds, enough to take a few with him. The lead shield bearer stepped into the room, raising a submachine gun. Julian leveled his pistol at the visor. Suddenly, the entire building shook. A low, rhythmic thump, thump, thump vibrated through the concrete floor, growing louder until it drowned out the gunfire. Glass shattered from the upper skylights as ropes dropped from the ceiling. "Freeze! United States National Guard!" The voice wasn't human. It was amplified by a massive loudspeaker from a hovering Black Hawk helicopter. Simultaneously, the rear wall of the corridor, the one behind the corrupt SWAT team, exploded inward. A tactical vehicle had breached the perimeter. Dozens of soldiers in full camouflage poured into the hallway, rifles raised. The corrupt cops froze. They were used to bullying civilians and outnumbering street gangs. But staring down the barrel of the US military was a different math entirely. "Drop your weapons! On your faces! Now!" Captain Jackson bellowed, stepping over the debris. One by one, the SWAT members of the 12th District dropped their guns. The clatter of metal on concrete sounded like music to Julian's ears. Julian lowered his weapon, letting out a long, ragged breath. He looked down at Sterling. "Get up, Riker. You're safe. Unfortunately for you." 2 weeks later, the arrest of Deputy Mayor Richard Graves was televised live. Julian personally slapped the cuffs on him in the middle of a City Hall press conference. Graves tried to run, tried to scream about his rights, but the cameras caught every second of his cowardice. The golden boy of Chicago was dragged out in disgrace, the ledger found in the auto body shop serving as the nail in his coffin. But the real satisfaction came in the courtroom of the 4th Circuit. The gallery was packed. Julian sat in the front row, wearing a crisp suit, his FBI badge clipped to his belt. Riker Sterling stood before the judge. He had taken a plea deal, 20 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against Graves and the corrupt judges. "Mr. Sterling," the new judge said, a stern man brought in from a different district. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Sterling looked back. He locked eyes with Julian. The arrogance was gone. The bulk was gone. He looked small. Sterling's voice cracked. "I just wanted to be somebody." The judge banged the gavel. "You are sentenced to 20 years in the USP Marion High Security Facility, remanded immediately." As the bailiffs led Sterling away, he passed by Julian. Julian didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just leaned forward and whispered one sentence. "You were right, Riker. In prison, you really are a nobody." Sterling hung his head and was dragged through the door, vanishing into the darkness of the system he had abused for so long. Julian walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. The air smelled fresh. He checked his phone. A text from his director. "Good work, Agent. Take a week off." Julian deleted the message. He didn't need a week off. There were other cities, other corrupt cops, other nobodies, waiting for justice. He walked to his new car, unlocked the door, and drove away. The lion was back on the hunt. And that is the story of how one corrupt officer underestimated the wrong man. Riker Sterling thought his badge gave him the right to be a king, but he forgot that a badge doesn't make you a hero. Integrity does. He called Julian a nobody, but in the end, Julian was the one who took down the entire empire. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much power someone thinks they have, the truth always has a way of coming out. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want to see more stories where the underdog strikes back and karma hits hard, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.